Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered, are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Lockdown Saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 367. Today, I'm joined by my good buddy, the bow hunting fiend, to talk about having the best and worst season at the same time. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. Hopefully you've got all your Christmas shopping done. I wrapped all my stuff up this past week. Actually started all of it and wrapped it all up this past weekend. I'm usually a very last minute shopper. I guess the weekend before is probably about the earliest I ever do it. Fortunately, my wife takes care of most of it. I basically just have to get something for her. So I do a daddy-daughter gift with my daughter every year, so I got to get that every year, and then we do a Secret Santa thing with her parents and her brother and sister, and so I have a person for that I have to get for as well. So my I guess my effort in that department is usually pretty limited. But with that, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. I hope you have an awesome weekend this upcoming weekend. Spending it with your family and friends and so forth. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. Have my good buddy, Mr. Greg Litzinger on. You guys know him. You love him. So it's interesting that it's just a conversation that Greg and I had because, his season this year feels like the past couple seasons I have had. And we kind of joke about that a little bit where, if you've listened to the podcast, for a couple years or whatever, you'll have heard us kind of talking, and even whenever I had Greg on, just me in general, talking about having, a season of near misses where, always in the game, was always around deer, was having good encounters, was seeing target bucks and things of that nature. Just something was always kind of happening, whether it was I, messed up the setup or, the deer just did some deer things and kept an arrow from getting released and so forth. And so Greg's having a very similar type of year this year. It's been, I think he said it specifically like this, but it's been kind of the best and worst year for him where he's been in the game every hunt. He's seen more deer, had more encounters. He spent some time, if you go back, a year, maybe even 2 years to some of the conversations Greg and I have had, he was breaking down some kind of newer pieces. And I think there's one piece in particular that he had hunted in the past, but kind of, I don't want to say abandoned, but kind of left. And now he's kind of come back and started hunting it again. And so, he's kind of finally got a couple of these places dialed in, and it's not just in his home state of New Jersey. He was also in Delaware and kind of had a similar thing where it's just he and the deer that he was trying to kill were just kind of ships passing in the night, if you will, like either passing right by each other, a half hour too late, a half hour too early, whatever the case is. And then, uncharacteristic of Greg, he's an excellent archer, and someone who's helped me out a ton with my shot process and just being a better archer, several years ago. We spent some time together. He released a couple arrows this year that just went awry. And we talk a little bit about that as it's, how do you kind of come back from that? And you do everything you can do. And, sometimes things just, don't go your way, and sometimes bad shots are made. And that's just kind of part of the archery game that we play. You feel terrible for it, for sure. But you kind of need to get back on the horse or back in the saddle, so to speak. And, people don't want to hear this. It's probably an unpopular thing, right? But I've always kind of said this because as I've gone through my own funk in shooting and, either missing deer whenever I was in Iowa, or even hitting the one and losing it whenever I was in Missouri, is like you kind of have to take that Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality of shooter gonna shoot. You just got to kind of keep trusting your process and trusting your shot. And maybe do a little practicing, dialing, whatever it takes. But the only way to get better at killing deer is to kill deer, right? And so that's kind of the old adage. And so it might not be popular with some folks, but that's kind of really the way you have to kind of go about it. You can shoot foam all you want for so long. Nothing gives you the same type of practice, if you will, or same visual or process or whatever you want to call it, than actually putting a pin on a live target. And so the more you do that, the ultimately the better you become at it. Which is why in recent years I've been more of a proponent of trying to hunt some does, and where it's maybe a little less pressure, you maybe get a little less amped up when the deer's approaching, and you get that repetition of putting a pin on a live target. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. As I said, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas, and as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, and today I've got my buddy, you know him, you love him, hailing from the Garden State, Mr. Greg, by God, Litzinger. What's going on, man? And the crowd goes wild.
What's happening?
It's the Interstate Warrior.
Just picture Ultimate Warrior running down to the WW ring.
Dude, if you dress up like the Ultimate Warrior sometime, come over with like what were they, like the green and red armbands that were all fringed and stuff, and your war paint on, and come over and just like start shaking stuff. So, funny story, like I only ever so when I was a kid, like probably most people our age, I don't know if you were, but I was super into well, back then it was WWF.
Everybody was.
Yeah, I was like,
and if you weren't, you're lying.
Right, yeah, exactly. I was into it probably until I watched it even like when I went to college.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where it started to kind of
the Stone Cold era.
Yeah, it started kind of phasing out a little bit. Just kind of had other stuff going on or whatever. But like me and my buddies, we'd always try to get together on, I think then it was like Mondays and Thursdays were like the big nights. Like one was, well, because then it changed to WWE, right? It was like Raw and whatever else, like WCW or whatever it was. And so we would always get together and watch those like that night or whatever. But when I was a kid, it's like I was super into it. That was like the straight up WWF days of like Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Big Paul Bundy, Hacksaw Jim Dugan, and I just wanted to go see like an event like bad, right? We were too poor to go like to a real WWF event or whatever. So like I think my dad took me. I forget who I even went with. It was probably my dad. We ended up going to, I think it was called the Jaffa Mosque or the War Memorial, and that might be the same place in like I think it was Johnstown. I want to say it was in, but it was like guys who were on the come up for WWF, like the B team or the B League. They weren't
the traveling team.
Yeah, it was like all the guys that are like trying to become
the
WWF
indies.
wrestlers.
You were on the indie scene.
I was on the indie circuit, dude. I'm on the indie WWF circuit. I just imagine them all driving in like white molester vans with like little trailers like all the indie rock bands do for like 20 years. Yeah. And I remember that, the Ultimate Warrior was one of my favorite wrestlers because I saw him at the Jaffa Mosque when he was called the Road Warrior before he became the Ultimate Warrior. Yeah. And came out the same way, like he'd just done a speedball, like running out,
all
like,
jacked up on speed,
shaking the ring, and shaking the ropes and stuff like that. And then the other guy that was there, and this was actually one of my favorite, was Kamala. Do you remember Kamala? Big black dude, had like I think it was a big like half moon painted on his stomach. I mean, the dude had to go like 450, 500 pounds. And he came out looking like he was like a tribal shaman or some shit, you know what I mean? And then that same one, and this was weird because this guy was actually in the WWF, was I think it was Jimmy Superfly Snuka was there that night too. And that was awesome. And that was the only time I ever got to go to a WWF event. But I still remember it like it was yesterday. Like,
what about George the Animal Steel?
Dude, I love Georgie Animal Steel. Like green tongue, eating the turnbuckles, you know what I mean? It's like, I mean... most of my seasons, I feel like I want to be Georgie Animal Steel and like eat turnbuckles. I feel like my time would be better spent doing that.
Probably.
It's like, how did your hunt go today, Clint? Oh, I ate a couple turnbuckles. It's like probably more productive than most hunts. But yeah, man. Were you big into WWF too?
Yeah,
you were.
My
who was your favorite one?
I would say if I had to, I would go Macho Man
Okay.
and Dusty Rhodes.
Snipping to Slim Jim.
Yep.
Oh, boy. Dude, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Total smoke show, dude. That was the only reason why I like Macho Man Randy Savage, just because Elizabeth would come on with him.
It was just his intensity. The Ultimate Warrior too, but he was, Macho's. I was probably, more into Macho than Ultimate Warrior.
Right. Yeah, Macho was always like, it sounded like he needed a laxative.
Yeah. And
like he was struggling to get one out.
like now you go back to see all his old promos, they're just like comedic gold. It's great.
Oh man, yeah. Dude, Ric Flair is one that like he was like, when you're into that stuff, like you always have like the guys that you like and then the guys that you hate, right? And I hated Ric Flair, but it was also because like I was more into WWF at the time, and Flair was WCW, right? Like before like everything merged, right? And I was not a fan of like the WCW stuff.
The Four Horsemen.
Yeah, like I always kind of felt like
Arn Anderson.
I always felt like the WCW was like the low rent version of WWF. You know what I mean? Like it was like the store brand.
Yeah.
WWF.
That's what I always thought too, and then they. Right before they merged, WCW and WWE were doing their Monday Night Raw battles. It was a good time to be a wrestling fan. I was like, my buddy was in college, and I was go visit him. We would just college bars would be straight. There'd be TVs everywhere. It's wrestling, and you're like, just weird time.
That's awesome, dude. But yeah, like Ric Flair. But now, like looking back on it, like I love like his. It's like you said, comedic gold.
Yeah.
Like he's like, woo.
Yeah, and he was.
What's he say? I'm a gator wearing something. Like the whole spiel that he does, like his famous one is so good. Like every now and then, like I'll come across it on like Instagram or like YouTube, and I'll watch it like 10 times just because like the line is so good.
Yeah, he perfected that art. I mean, phenomenal. Yeah. He sold that
persona. Yeah, Rolex wearing, like
kid stealing, wheeling dealing.
I spilled more alcohol last night than you could pay for in a year. like it's that whole trip. Like it was just like when I was a kid, I didn't get it. You know what I mean? I was like, this guy's an asshole. Yeah. I don't like him. But as I got older, I was like, kind of want to be Ric Flair.
Yeah. How could you not? Looking back now, I was like, he had it. Yeah.
I want gator shoes. I want to wear Rolex. I want to spill more alcohol than like the next guy could afford. Like. He was really kind of like a pimp. Yep. You know what I mean? Like to a degree, like that was his thing. Or like a modern day NFL player.
Yeah. True.
Anyway, people are probably like, what the hell did I just tune into? Like
7 minutes in.
7 minutes in, we're still talking about WWF wrestling. They're like, good God. Yeah. So we should probably kick over to
this is a hunting podcast.
This is a hunting podcast. Contrary to popular belief, we do talk about deer hunting. But so man, you kicked your season off early. Well, let's back up for a second because you had a whole game plan for this year. Yeah. Going into the year, and when we talked, like and it was a solid plan. Like you had things kind of pretty well dialed in. All things considered. Like it's funny because it's not funny, but like I could sympathize with a lot of what you were going through this year because it's been a lot of what my past probably 2 seasons have been like, and we've talked about that, like not just on the podcast but like privately, and
private chats.
What's that?
Our private chats.
Our private chats. Yeah, we got to keep something for ourselves. No. But no, I was getting on deer and having like encounters and stuff like that, and it was just like, just couldn't seal the deal, and like, and I talked to you. You and Chad are probably like the 2 guys I talked to probably the most during the season, and you would just always be like, dude, you're on them. Just keep after it. Keep doing it. Like you're doing the right thing, because you get in your own head, right? Where it's like, I'm screwing this all up and I don't know what I'm doing,
I'm new.
I don't know what's happening, and so you kind of had a season of close calls, shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? And
2 seasons in a row now. It's like,
yeah. So let's back up so you started off the season in Delaware. Yeah. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Delaware's they did the camera ban.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot about that.
So I put out cameras, I don't know, right before the ban took effect. So I went like a month after that. I had time. I pulled all the cameras, and every camera I put out had hammers on it. So I'm like, well, all right, they're going to be here in September. And I seen more people where I was getting those bucks. So I was like, well, all right, I gotta try and find something. And the first 3 days, the biggest buck I seen with my eyes was a decent 8, like nothing crazy, a bunch of bucks, but they were coming down this beam field and then just went into private. And then I had like a 4-pointer, which I probably would have shot, just because it was my last day there in September,
Right.
But it was just tough not having
intel.
Yeah, and Delaware, where I hunt, like some of the fields are public, but a lot of fields are private. So it's like you can't even walk the field edge, cut a track, because it's like there's like a hedgerow, and it's like the woods, and it's like some pines and whatnot. But it's hard to cut a big track. So you're like, all right, you can't really glass the fields, So it's very challenging not having direct intel. So you had to go to, and I was on deer almost every sit, and then Todd ended up seeing 2 really good bucks. But the next 2 days we hunted there, and it's like we see more people than bucks. So because nobody was hunting back there, so we started going back in there again, and then somebody came in right after we Todd and I separated. I was walking down this field edge, but I guess where the property line is like half the road is private and public. Well, I'm walking on the soybeans,
right? And
this dude in a beat up Dakota comes, this is private property. I'm like, all right. He's like, you can't go to the field. I'm like, I'm in the road.
Right.
It's like, how can I get to the woods? Like, yes. And it was just, the dude was just a local, but
right.
And we had a farmer coming there, and there was somebody riding dirt bikes. Then that guy was like riding
like
around,
a full-on rodeo.
Yeah, and walking out that night, that's how I cut a big set of tracks that were going back in that weren't there. I texted Todd.
I remember you texted me that too.
I was like, you see any bucks, Todd? He's like, no. I was like, well, they were out in the field and somebody chased them back in. So we hunted there and like nothing, and then I went back in, it had to be end of October, right before Halloween, and it's like the worst. It's prime time, like best time to be in the woods. I think, in my opinion, bucks are very patternable and moving point A to point B, and it got so hot the first night. I had a solid deer at 6 yards. I just ran out of daylight, ran out of daylight, and he's right here. Like I could see him like moving around, and I'm like, I was only like 3 feet off the ground. He was 5 or 6 yards away, and I'm like, he came into a scrape and just J hooked down one side of the scrape. Like, and I picked the right spot. It was just ran out, out of time. Yep. And then run all around. We had some rain and just nothing I wanted to shoot. And then the last morning, Halloween morning, because so
you started there in September.
Yeah.
Right. That was your first kind of foray.
Yeah.
Right. How many days were you there in September?
I think three and a half days.
And then you went back in October.
Yeah.
What time frame was that?
Halloween. 3 days for Halloween.
3 days. So total of 6 days.
Yeah.
Right. So before we get to like that part of it, like question, because I was talking to our buddy Jake Hofer from Exodus. Like he and I did a podcast together for the Truth podcast, and then he and I did one for Exodus. I don't remember if it was on this podcast or if it was on his, that we were talking about just what were we talking? Oh, we were talking about how like Kansas has changed. Like when I talked to the taxidermist, like he was kind of explaining to me how Kansas has changed over the years and so forth. And Jake kind of reminded me, because I had forgotten that they also banned trail cameras, right? And so he just kind of asked me what I thought, if I had any idea or any thoughts on like what I think the implications of that might be. And so mine was, on short time, like guys probably are less choosy, or probably going to shoot, especially out there, like the first like 125, 130 inch deer they see, especially if they're coming from a state that doesn't have good deer or decent deer. And I was like, which will probably hurt the herd dynamics overall, the age structure and stuff like that. But I think more specifically, it's like, man, like how hard, especially when you're talking like, it's different. Like when I go out to, like, say for like Kansas, for example, I'll try to take like 2 weeks, like, cause it's just, I don't have cameras. Like I need to take like it's going to take me a little bit to figure stuff out, you know. But like when you're talking about doing,
you're not Andy May.
No, I'm not Andy May. I am the furthest thing, dude. It took me 3 years. You know what I mean? Like that dude does it in like 2 days. You know what I mean? Like give me a break. But you know, thinking about short time hunts, you know what I mean? Like trying to go out and get something done in like 3 days in September and 3 days in October. I mean, how much harder does it make it? You know, whenever you don't have any intel, when you get there, like as far as like trail cameras go, it
definitely. The bar, in my opinion, gets lowered a little bit because you don't, because it's nice having like, oh man, or especially if you can't see them in a field. Like if you're just like Delaware, and you say, I'm pretty much hunting some pines and some like, you don't see them until like, oh, they're close to getting in shooting range. So it's like you don't have that long, you know, I can glass them from a field. At least I didn't this year. Because I went down there a couple times and I didn't really see anything in Delaware. You know, the day before I was down there, I brought the camper down there, and like 2 days before the season, it was nothing, dude. Every field was just bone dry. So I was like, I'm literally going in blind. Right. And it does. Like I say, I was going to shoot that 4-pointer. I would shot a doe, you know, or just a buck, because I was like, I need to get this monkey off my back, so to speak. I was like, I just need to kill one, then I'll be all right, you know. Right. I've hunted Delaware off and on for years, and it's like I've passed some bucks. Looking back now, back when I was shooting really good bucks, I went to Delaware and I passed some bucks. And it's like, what the fuck stupid ass. So it's like, why would you pass that? Now I'm like, you're dead all day long. You know?
Right. Well, you and I even talked about that a little bit, where it's like, you know, when you're going through a rough patch, and like Tony's talked about this too. Like I've talked about it with Tony, where it's like when you hit a rough patch of whether you're just not seeing deer, you know, or you're passing deer, you know, you're not seeing what you want to shoot, or you're missing, or you're hitting and not recovering. It's there's a point that comes that you just have to start just killing deer.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that was one thing that you've told me, you know, and that Tony has told me, and I started that last year, you know. And so what you're kind of talking about, it's like, dude, I've been there, where it's like, I just need to put something on the ground to know that I can do it. Yeah. You know, because it's, you know, because, man, especially if you're passing deer and stuff like that, if you're trying to hunt like a specific deer or maybe 2 or 3 specific deer that get you excited, and you just don't get opportunities at them. Yeah. For 2 or 3 dude, you might go 2 or 3 years and not let an arrow go at an animal. Yeah. Like that's possible.
Yeah, it's very possible, actually.
It's extremely possible. I've lived it. You know what I mean? Where it's, you know, last year, not this past Thanksgiving, but the Thanksgiving before, I killed that doe, and that was probably the first arrow that I released at an animal
since Iowa,
since Missouri. So it's probably 3 seasons. Yeah. You know, just because I passed a lot of deer and I wasn't really doe hunting necessarily, you know.
That's weird. Like, I know, like after the Delaware thing, it's like, I'll come back. And I worked a lot in October. I worked every Sunday in October. Yeah. So I didn't really get a lot of hunting in October. But like September, I hunted almost every day after work, knowing I was going to work a lot in October. And I told Monica, I was like, listen, she goes, just, all right, hunt. So I hunted a lot. And every time this happens, and which I despise New Jersey for, is to earn a buck. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I had that 5-pointer I was hunting, and
he was a freaky deer too, man.
Big, mature, no brow 5-pointer. You know, just a beautiful deer. And it's like I had him at no buck tag because I didn't shoot a doe. It was like the second week of the season or whatever. You know, and it's like I had him at 15, 17 yards for like 5 minutes, and it was like, and every time that has happened, I've literally had this type of season I'm having right now. It's like a bad omen. It's like, and there was your moment, and it's gone. And it's just like, and I don't know if it's I just get in my head and I just mess it up, or like I just over try or whatever. But it's like every time that has happened in the last 10 years, I have a shooter in New Jersy in the first week or 2 of the season. Dude, it's a season of hell. Right. And like, that's no joke. I every time that's happened, I've never shot a buck.
Do you think it's that you start to press too hard because you're trying to because you know the deer's there now? So like it's almost better if you don't see him early And you don't know. It's like, well, did he transition? Did he go somewhere else? Did somebody kill him? Like, I don't know if he's here. So now I'm just going to try to kill a doe whenever it happens.
I just think I don't have, on a yearly basis, I don't have many mature deer in bow range to begin with. I'm usually one or two. That's about it. Like, I'm not a guy that's like, oh, I have 37 bucks in range. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Like,
you ain't that guy, pal.
yeah, basically. Like, if I see a buck, usually it's like, if I don't kill that deer, I'm never seeing him again.
Yeah. No,
and that 5-pointer, haven't seen him. I got like 3 more pictures of him all season. That's it. Like, and I dumped a lot of cameras where he was, where I thought he was going to be. Nothing. So he might have got killed, which kind of sucks. But if he made it, Lord knows what it's going to look like next year, you know? But it's like, I don't know what it is. It's just, it's like a bad omen for me. And I can literally, I mean, I'm not superstitious, so to speak. You
just
know,
a little stitious.
Yeah. It's like, every time that's happened, I have the season I'm having right now. Like, I'm either missing, you know, or I'm not seeing anything, you know, or like this year, hitting $3 and like not finding them. So it's like, I don't know if it's mental, subconsciously, or is it just that's just the way it goes.
Right.
You know.
I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I know. Oh, so we don't have an earn a buck, right? Which would drive me crazy if we did.
Yeah.
But you know, I know for me, if I know early that a deer is, you know, maybe I have an encounter, right, or I just know he's in a killable area. Like I know locally, it's like I'll start to press, you know, a little bit, and that was something that Jake and I talked about a little bit, to where, you know, this year was a little different for me, you know, and I'd be curious to see if I would be curious to see how you feel, if you feel the same way, because, you know, using trail cameras for me this year was a lot different than it had been in years past, where I have a bunch in the North Piece. You know, I saw a really good deer on the second hunt I had there this year. When I say really good deer, it was like a Pope and Young 8-point. It was a nice buck. But I didn't really check any cameras up there. Like I checked them. I didn't check all of them. I checked like 1 or 2 that I happened to be in the area of when I hunted up there. And then locally, I didn't check any, you know, and so when I was hunting even that spot where I killed that buck this year in PA, I had really no clue what was in that spot. Yeah. And I was basically using all the intel, even on the North Piece, from the camera intel that I had from like the 2 years prior that I ran cameras. And locally, in a lot of those places, it's been like 3 years that I've run cameras in general areas, that I just used that basic like 3 years of intel of knowing what I've seen deer do on camera the past couple of years, when they kind of show up, what scrapes they like, you know. I did take a hike and like check food sources and stuff like that, like where the acorns were at, stuff like that. But what I had said to him was like, I felt like this year I hunted way more free because I didn't have the burden of thinking that, like, I had this one piece of data that might be like confirmation biases. Like, it showed me what I wanted to see. Yeah. So now I over index on that, as opposed to like the 3 years of intel that I already have, that I'm making a plan based off of, that I have 3 years worth of information. Yeah. But this one thing happens, and all of a sudden I'm like, that's the thing I'm gonna use that to hunt, you know? And I'm guilty of that in years past. And this year I didn't, and it wasn't even purposeful. I just didn't have time to check. And so I was just hunting to hunt, you know? So I'm curious if you kind of feel the same way. Like, in hindsight, would you have been better off not getting any pictures of that deer and then never seeing him, do you think?
So I probably wouldn't have hunted there, where I got that, like, I threw that camera out. I was literally picking up a bunch of cameras, I think, last March, I think. And it's like, and it was just this swamp, and it was just this scrape on this, I mean, it's like old thumb. It's like, it looks like it was a hit. I was like, there was a little bit of like, the ground swarp a little bit. I'm like, that looks like an old scrape. I'm like, you know, I'll put this $20 camera out. Right. No lock, no nothing. Just put it up. And it was like March, middle of March. And I was like, I'm putting the cameras. I'm like, oh man, good look at that camera. I go out there, and it was like, you see the nubs, and then you just see these 3 bucks like 5 times a week. And I'm like, oh, all right. And it was like June, and I was literally, every time it rained, I was out there. And because I knew the swamp, you know, pretty well. So I was all over that place. And like, they're either coming out or going in. So I'm like, this has got to be the spot. You know, it was like, because there's 3 bucks. I'd shoot all 3. Right. So it's like the monster, and then that 5. And it's like, I'll take that cool deer over that big 9 just because it's unique. You know, like the 9's like, it's definitely a bigger deer, but that 5-pointer was like, all right. You know, like,
you all have always liked like big, unique bucks. Like, you know, the running joke. No, it's not a joke, but it's like a running thing. Like, even like Aaron, it's like, I'll get a big 6 on camera and I'll send it to people
from Missouri, Iowa. It's like, I was like, that's right in my alley, man.
Like I said, like I had a big 6 on camera. I sent it to Aaron. He's like, dude, that's a Litzinger buck right there. I was like, it sure as shit is.
And I set up 3 killing spots in that swamp. Like I can good access for the most part. Like I'm not cutting a lot of deer trails, you know, but it's like the specific wind, like a northeast. And the first time I seen that buck, I went into this flat about 150 yards away, Oak Flat, it was dropping. You know, it was a big rub there the 2 days prior in a rainstorm. I was out moving stuff around. I was like, I'm gonna come back here. And it's like 5 o'clock. I'm still hunting my way in because there's already deer in the flat. And I get to the spot. I literally climb up. I just put the platform on, and I'm getting a ring of steps out. You know, the 2 of them, put them on, and I look up. I'm like, oh man, there's some does. So I hurry up real. Like I still have my waist, just the lineman's on. I look over, and there he is, and I'm like, so I'm pulling my bow up, and I wasn't even like set up. Like he was that close. I didn't even have the tether on. Like I'm like, and I'm like, it's like 5 o'clock, and in September, you know, it's getting dark at like 8. Like so I'm like, he's bedded. Like they're bedded in that swamp, and I'm like, I don't believe this is happening, you know. And then it was on after that. I was like, he's here, and then we went away camping to up there in PA camping for my birthday. And that's why I hate cell cameras. Because I remember there's no service up there, but like I remember driving home, and it was like the 30th, we had a northeast wind projected for a stand I could hunt. And sure enough, that camera goes off. I pull up, and there he is at that scrape, going into bedding at like 7:30 in the morning. I'm like, drive home. I was like, oh God. I was like, this is just like, now he says, and I got
Greg, you're a good family man. You're a good family man.
Yeah. And he, I had him a few more times, and it's just, you know, typical, you know, right around us about the October 6th, they scatter usually right around that time frame. October 4th to the 10th is when and pretty much I got him once, I think right around Halloween, but it was like 2 a.m.
Right.
You know,
so you ended up going back to Delaware then around Halloween.
Yeah.
Because you were kind of taking October.
I just worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Just working. So what happened on that second trip to Delaware then?
First night was just awful hot. Like Todd and I went down, you know, and putting up a tent, and it was like, I mean, it was brutal, man. I got down there.
Nothing like tent camping in like sweltering heat. That's like an extra level of hell right there.
Yeah, so it's like we get the tent set up, you know, and he's like, where are we going to go? I was like, I'm going to go where I had that bunch of funky bucks, you know, pinies, you know, and he's like, all right, well, I'm going over here. So I go in, and scrapes are up there. I was like, I'm going to just sneak my way up, you know, and I had rubber boots on, but I'm just sweating, so it doesn't really matter. Right, but I was like, so I sprayed some stuff in there. I'm like, this scrape was just hit. It was just tore up. I'm like, shit in the scrape and everything. I'm like, man, standing brown beans. And I'm like, well, they're going to eat. You know, I'm 100 yards off the bean field. I'm like, dude, it's on tonight. Right. I climb up this noisy ass pine tree, and it was like, just like every move, everything's falling. So I'm like, I literally was like motionless, like, and, you know, with the saddle, like the tether moving. So I'm like, I took the shirt, the long sleeve shirt I had, I put it on a tree and then put the thing around it so it won't make noise. And the clock's ticking away, and I'm like, man, I ain't gonna see shit. I was like, the wind's perfect because they're calling for a certain wind. It was ended up blowing northeast. It was calling for like a southwest. I was walking in, I was like, this is northeast. This is like primo. And sure enough, man, about 15 minutes before light, I see the feet moving. A single deer. I was like, well, get ready. Bow's ready. I'm like, it's dark, dark, dark. And I'm like, I'm looking at that scrape area. I look over, he's right here. Checking that scrape. I was just like, he almost was catching my wind, and then he kept coming to me. I was like,
how close was he at that point?
10 yards.
Jeez.
And it was like, and I could see him, and it was like, it's just darker, darker, darker. And I'm like, I just can't do anything. And then he just kept coming right to my tree, and then he caught my ground set. And I was like, oh, here we go. So he just stopped moving, and all I could see was just the one side of his antler, and I'm like, he just sat, didn't make it, like no tail, like nothing. And I'm like, and I'm holding the bow, and I'm like, And eventually he stomped and blew off. And I'm like, oh, man, it's on. And then we just had awful wind, just swirling winds. And then the last morning we had a rain the 30th. I mean, like poured that night. And we got a good, solid, cold front came in. And I had a fantastic scrape about 200 yards off this, I guess it'd be like a gas line, down there. I'm assuming, because it's not a power line, but it's like a right away or something.
Right.
And so I snuck in there super early, climbed up, and dude, it was like that rain and that cold front. It was like ants. This is deer everywhere. And I'm like, and I'm looking at the clock tick away, and there's like a crap load of spikes and button bucks coming into this scrape. And I'm just looking at the clock. I was like, man, I got to be on the road at like 12, like 1 o'clock the latest. So I was like, I got to be out at like 11:30. If I do hit one, like 11:30, I cut off, because I still got to go break down camp and everything and get home before trick or treating, you know. So I was like, man, it's like, I don't know, 10:45, 11. You know, I see this button buck comes out through the scrape, mills around the scrape and goes. And I look up, and here comes this gnarly old pine buck coming right at me. I was like, oh, he's going to the scrape. So I have to pull back, and I'm like 30 yards away from the scrape. Clear shooting lane into the scrape, and all of a sudden I'm like, where's he at? I look over, he's going this way. I thought he caught the buck's scent on the ground, was going this way. So I'm like, I ranged that buck at 35. So I swung around. I was like, he's 35. He stopped. I was like, he's dead. Boom. And I just watched the arrow. I'm like, left, right, it's good. I was like, it's not dropping. And I was like, and it just straight meat hit. Blew all the way into the lighted knock. He ran off. And I'm like, it's a big 4-blade broadhead. It's a big cut. I was like, maybe I got that artery.
Right.
Something.
Hit him high. Right?
Yep. Yeah. Super high.
And what you were thinking initially, like no man's land area. Right?
Yep. So I wait about 15 minutes. I get down, go over and find the arrow, because the arrow blew through up to the fletching. And then I found the arrow broke, and I found the arrow, and I'm like, it's just straight meat, like not even blood. And I'm like,
that's like one of the worst feelings on the planet.
So then I look up about 30 yards, like there's a lighted knock, and I'm like, I go up to it. There's not even blood on the lighted knock. I mean, when I say straight meat, is like there's not even blood clean on the white fletching and nothing. I'm like, well, I can see the roughing through the pine. So I was like, I went and got my stuff, and I'm gonna track, see if I can find some blood. Pine needles is tough if you ain't got blood. Like it's like impossible. And I end up seeing so many other bucks. I seen a possible pope looking for my deer. It's like, I end up finding like a great bedding area, and I was like, I gotta get out of here, go home, trick or treat.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, yay, trick or treating. And next morning I was out, and it was like light switch, dude, deer everywhere.
So you're back in Jersey.
Yeah, right? I drove all the way home, and it's like,
because I remember you text me. I think it was right after you hit that deer.
Yeah.
Like you texted me, and you weren't feeling good about it, off the rip. And that's always one of those things. Like I hit a deer there once.
I've never found, looking back, I'm not a lucky, if I make a marginal shot, statistically speaking, I'm not finding that deer. I hunt with people that can just shoot them in their foot. And a deer goes 100 yards and dies, and it's like, how? How does that even happen?
So it was a couple, I forget what year it was, but I hit one. Actually, I was just doe hunting that year, and I hit one high. And I don't even know how or why. There was nothing between she and I except air and opportunity.
Yep.
And didn't rush the shot. It all felt good. I think she was probably, in hindsight, she was probably just in that, because I shoot one pin at depending on which bow I'm shooting, around 26 yards. And I know I'm good out to 30, and I'm pretty flat out to 10 to 12. There's a funky range though between 13 to 20 or 13 to 17, where it's I'm going to shoot high, in that area.
Yep.
And if I'm high enough in a tree, it doesn't usually matter, because it just I get that trajectory of going down to where it's even if I do hit a little bit high, it's it just blows through everything below it, and I'm good. But if I'm not high enough in the tree and I'm shooting too flat, that high hit kind of hurts me, a little bit. And so I think in hindsight, looking back on that, this is what I hypothesized anyway, is that she was at that funky range. I just wasn't high enough in the tree.
Yep.
And when I hit her, like she took off. There was hardly any blood.
Yep.
You know, found the arrow, like you were saying, like there was meat on it and hardly any blood.
Yep.
I ended up tracking like blood probably only like 30 yards, you know, and she also ran through like some water that was there, which didn't help me at all, you know, and I just was following, like, it was really, really thick, and there was really like defined deer trails where it's like, unless you were going to run through crap, like this is how you would go. And she was obviously hit, so she wasn't going to go barreling through. She had the least resistance, right? I ended up walking up on her to about 15 yards and found her bedded or whatever. Yeah. And she just got up and took off, and like I went and checked the bed, and it was already like clotting up. Like there was no, because I remember I texted you after that, and you were like, did you see any blood in her mouth or anything like that? And like, no, she was fine. Then it was like, then you were like, then you hit that no man's land, you know, backstrap.
And what sucks is like, it's not really a no man's land. Like the lungs goes right up there, but it's like a 1 inch zone of just straight meat, you know, like if you come down, which like in hindsight with the Delaware one, like if I would have clipped the top of that lung, like it would have been for a long day. Like I literally would have had to go home, trick or treat, to come back. Like it was like, you know, and the deer was actually 28. You know, I shot him for 35 because he actually was coming in this way. He scent checked that scrape from, you know, downwind, like a crosswind. He didn't need to go to it, you know. But like I said, the morning after Halloween, I was going to go to a different spot, like walking in there, and I'm like,
in Jersey now.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't feel like walking back that far because that spot is a legit. It's 1.3 miles. The trail where you got to park and walk so you don't blow out the woods. It's 1.3 miles just to get to the tree. I was like, I'm walking out there. I was like, I don't feel like walking that far. Right. And I was like, I know it's another spot here. I was like, I ran cameras for years. I never hunted. I'm like, let me just go in here. Right. Never, you know, I was like, this tree will work. You know, so I'm like 4 feet off the ground, 5 feet off the ground. And it's just like Mount Laurel and like scrub oaks and some oaks. A small little open spot and a big heavy run. And like, there's always like 5 or 6 scrapes in this little high knob on this trail. Right. And I'm 17 yards from there. I'm getting up daybreak. I look over it, and it's just like northwest wind. I was like, I didn't think it would be a good spot to hunt. That's why I never hunted it. But the way the trail is, like with a hard northwest wind, it's like your scent stream is going into the swamp without catching the deer trails. And I had deer on both sides of me, and I'm like, man, this is like, they're right there. And I'm like, and this doe comes in. You know, the next thing you know, you hear brr, brr, and it's like these little spikes and 4-pointers running around, and they take off. And I'm sitting there, and I'm actually texting my buddy John. I was like, man, there's a lot of deer. There's nothing big. I look up, and I just see tall coming at me.
Right. Like, so what's the date on this?
This is first. Okay. Yeah. So I was like, and it's just like, he's coming. Then I'm like, so I hurry, like, put the phone, you know, I grab the bow, and I'm like, I'm pulling back, and I'm expecting him to come this way. And he cuts this way. So it's like, you know, Mount Laurel. So it's like, it's not like defined, like, oh, I got shoot lanes. And he stops. I mean, like right here, like, and I'm like, oh, he's right there. I'm going to let it eat, and just boom. And it just sounds like a baseball bat hitting the, you know, 2 baseballs that hitting. And I see my lighted knock just fly up in the air. And I'm like, and he takes off, and I'm like, so I wait like 5 minutes to go down there, and it's like I find my arrow, and literally the broadheads broke off inside the thing, and I'm like, no blood on the arrow, and I'm like, did I hit that? He was so close. I just hit the top of that knuckle, broke his leg for sure, you know. But it's like I came down, I just hit straight bone, and I'm like, so I tracked like there was like nothing. So I'm sitting on the swamp edge. My buddy's like, well, should I come out? I'm like, dude, I got nothing, man. I was like, the broadhead broke. I was like, I don't even have blood on the arrow. Like, so some meat on the insert, and that's it. And I'm like,
I remember when you texted me after that one. Like, you were like, I hate life. Yeah. And I felt, because like, I felt so bad for you because you're so diligent about like shooting. Like you're like one of the best. You're one of the best archers I know as far as like a shot, judging distance, consistency. I don't, out of my entire friend group, like close friend group, there's not another. If I had to put an amount of money on a shot, or
Not
something,
this year.
something bad is going to happen to me if this shot
Yeah.
doesn't get made.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one person to make that shot, I would pick you.
Yeah.
You know, and not just because I know that you've shot competitively, like you're diligent about your shot process, like you kind of like you tweak things, like when things get out of whack, you recognize when things get out of whack, and you'll go back to the drawing board and just kind of not rebuild your shot, but like refocus on just releases, you know, and not care where the arrow hits. I'm just going to release, so it feels right. And I had a bad run of just, you know, like probably what was it, like 5 years ago or so, where I was having a rough patch of just like punching triggers and stuff like that. And you and I spent a lot of time together, like working together and rebuilding my shot to where it was like all of a sudden one day I don't remember if I texted you or called you. I was like, I don't know what happened, man, but all of a sudden like the shit just works now.
Yeah.
Like the anxiety went away. Like every shot I make or I take, I always feel like I'm going to land it right where I want to land it, you know, tuning issues and et cetera, notwithstanding. And so like I didn't say a whole lot back to you that day, only because I've been there and I'm like, the last thing he wants is for someone to like tell him it's going to be all right. Yeah. Or like, did you think about this? It's like, no, asshole. That never thought, like killing the deer never crossed my mind.
And that's weird. Like I practice those shots too. It's like, I just don't know, like position wise in Laurel. Cause I literally, like, you know, anybody hunts Laurel, you know, it's like, it's thick Laurel. So it's like, I seen tall antlers, like I seen a little bit of like in the parts of the back. I'm like, all right, well, there's the chest. I couldn't see his leg. I didn't have a defined thing, and he's moving. Like it took a minute, like like for him to stop. Like he was going to go. So I'm like, I'm comfortable taking that shot. Like I wouldn't change. I don't think I rushed a shot, you know. But so I'm sitting at the swamp edge. My buddy's like, well, let's just get back in the tree. Just. You know, maybe there's a definitely hot dome area. He could come back, which there's stories out there that
for sure.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right. So I climb up in there and it's like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 hours goes by. And my buddy Tony's like, just shoot the next deer that comes through. Don't care what it is. If it's legal, shoot it.
Yep.
Get this off your back. Get it out of your head.
You got to shoot. Yeah.
So I literally, and no deer ever responds to my grunts. I was like, brrr. I just let out a couple. I hear, and I'm like, and you don't get that in Jersey.
No,
so I'm like, that's another hunter. And I hear, I was like, oh. So I grab my bow and I'm like, and I just see horns coming out, and this comes right to the scrape, and I'm like, and shooting, and I'm like, and it shot low, and I'm like, but he hit him hard, and he stumbled down, like ran into a tree. I'm like, oh, it's low heart shot. I was like a little low because I wasn't that high, and I'm like, well, the angle is better than I was 20 feet in the air, you know. So I'm only 3 feet off the ground. I was like, oh, that deer's goner. You know, big 4-blade broadhead. That deer's a goner. I wait like 20 minutes. I text my buddy John again. He goes, I'm getting on the bridge. He lives in Delaware. And I was like, well, hold on. Blood everywhere. So I was like, oh, all right. I'm tracking. And it's a straight shot. He's running through Laurel. So I'm like, oh, this buck is dead. So I go grab all my stuff. And I'm like, he's going to be right here over this little mound. Get up top. It's like open flat. He just bags to hard left. And I'm like, no. But and when I first found the blood, I'm sitting there and I hear that doe that was hot earlier come running right by me. I mean, inches by me. And that 4-pointer was whatever, 5-pointer, whatever, and he's the same thing, right through me. So I'm like, and then when he made it hard left, I'm like, well, maybe it's what the hot doe, you know, he's just gonna, you know, die in there. And it's like, and he's just weaving, going here, there, and I'm like, and he starts going to the swamp, and it's a lot of blood. I mean, it's like significant amount of blood. So I'm like, I just stop. I call my buddies. They've got a dog tracker's number. I call the guy. He's like, I'm actually in Alloway. So, you know, I was like, yeah, I'm 15 minutes from Alloway. So he's like, all right, I'll call you when I'm done. So we meet up, and he looks at the arrow, and he goes, we're not finding this deer. He goes, that's straight brisket. And he's like, but he goes, you got good blood. I showed him pictures. He goes, well, all right, well, that's, at least you got blood. He goes, maybe you nicked it. He goes, where were you? I was like, I don't know, 3-4 feet off the ground. How far was the deer? He's like 17. He's like, that's He goes, I'd be more comfortable with that much blood if you're 20 feet in the air, because you went high and then come out the brisket. He goes, you're straight brisket.
Right.
And he goes, you probably sliced both, shoulders good. He goes, what broadheads you use? I show him broadheads there, and he goes, oh, yeah, it's a big broadhead, Mm-hmm. And I tracked before the dog came in, and it was never like searching for blood. I was like, there it is, there it is, there it is.
Right.
I was 400 or 500 yards. We went another 500 yards, and that deer never stopped moving. So he's all rutted up, Right. And he goes, that deer is either alive and well, or he's just going to go till he dies. But since he's gone 1,000 yards at this point, and his dog tracks on the scent pheromones, not on blood.
Okay.
Like the death scent or death pheromone.
Right.
And he's like, she'll go as long as she smells it. And then he goes, but you see her now, she's doing this. He's like, he's eating. We're on this oak flat, and there's all does where he's just doing this. He pulls up his,
tracker.
He's on Onyx, and he's like, see this? He goes, he's eating. And he goes, I've been doing this for 30 years. He goes, when a buck's doing that or deer's doing that, he goes, statistically, if he's going to die, it's going to take days for him to die.
Right.
So
we're not talking like an hour or two.
Yeah, he goes, we can keep going. She's on the scent. He goes, but we're getting close to that private, and he goes, we have to call the guy. He goes, so we went a little bit further, and he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, dude, we're at like 1,100 yards. And I'm like,
right.
And it was never like the big heavy blood stop, but every now and again it'd be just a pin drop. And he goes, just the meat hits dried up, it's clotted up. And he goes, hey, if you got heart, that deer would have been dead. Even if you would have just nicked the heart. He goes, it would have been better if you would have shot him in the, a liver.
Right.
Because he would have bedded down by now.
Right.
We would have found
the fact that he's not bedding down.
Yeah.
At all,
he goes, not one bed. So I was like, so at this point I'm out of arrows.
Right.
So I'm like, because I had issues with some bad inserts. So I had to like completely grab a whole nother set of batch of arrows. So I didn't hunt the second. I spent all day.
When you go through all your arrows in a hunting season, like that's been a good year.
Yeah. So I grabbed the 300 spine arrows that I built years ago. I never shot. So I'm like, these will work. I'm grabbing stuff here, like, and I like the Zinger Fletchers. Those things are great, dude. It's like to slide them on the arrow. And I'm like, I ain't got a Fletch arrows. I'm like, these things are great. And I just grabbed every broadhead I could. I'm like, this one's not flying good. I stuck on a 3-blade.
Right.
I'm like, it's 1.1 cut. It's good enough. But I was like, so I spent all day the second shooting and tuning. I took everything off the bow and started from scratch, and then I was like, just dropping at 40. And I'm like, and those arrows I'm on 580 grains now. They're heavy. I was like, so I'm like, and I went out the third and seen a big 6. He came in and he's there again. I actually put the hang on out with me. I was in a cedar. I wasn't, much higher than your painting.
Right.
There's a big scraping area, and I had him for probably like 20 minutes. He wanted to come in, but he knew something wasn't right,
Right.
And it's like the wind was kind of starting to shift a little bit. It was 2 p.m. and I was on bucks that whole week from about 2 o'clock. I would see a nice buck, and then it was like back to work for a few days.
Right.
And I was in like that. I showed you that big 6 I was hunting.
Yeah.
Him and I played cat and mouse. I would go into a spot, and I pull the camera, and it was like I was there the day before, he was there the day after, and we did this for like 10 days. And I'm like, I'm here, like wherever I was, like we were like crossing paths. We were just,
isn't that the most frustrating thing, man?
12-hour difference. And it's like, dude, like we're just meant to be together, man. Let's just make it happen.
Right. You remember the big freaky deer I had on camera that had like had the double row? Like he had, not a double row, but he had 2 G3s on both sides. You remember that freaky deer? It was the same thing with him, where basically I had him consistent in like the very beginning of the season, like the very opening part of our season, like so the very kind of like middle of September. But I really didn't start hunting him till like middle of October, really. And every time I would hunt him, I would be at a spot, and then I would pick him up on a camera at like 70 yards away, like on that scrape. I was hunting like the travel to that scrape, and he would come through like 3 hours after I left the tree, like after it got dark, right? Or I would go in the morning and hunt a spot, and I would go to leave, and I would be like, all right, I'm going to pull that camera that's 50 yards away. You know, again, hunting another scrape, and I was hunting to the scrape kind of setup. I would go there, and it's like, oh, cool. He showed up 30 minutes before I got here. You know what I mean? It was like that the whole freaking month of October and it's the most frustrating thing. 'Cause you're like, I'm on him. Like, I know what he wants. I know what he's doing. Like, I know exactly what he's doing. I just can't time it to where I get to the right spot when he's going to be there.
And the one I hunted, and it was like I hunted it all day. I didn't see nothing that day. Perfect wind. Like, everything was good. And that's one of the spots I got a cell cam. And the next day, it was like deer apocalypse. It was like parade of does and bucks all day long. I'm like, dude, I sat there all day and didn't see shit. And it was like the next day, I was like, woo, party, Greg's not here. And I'm like, and like my entry, like, it's pretty clean in that area, like, because there's a big hiking trail, so it's like human sense is not necessarily an issue. There's always there's bird hunters, dog hunters, you know, like they're dog walkers, like runners, mountain bikers, and I'm like, how is this? Like, there's 2 week span. It was like we were literally 12 hours, like we were there but not there.
So that area that gets that much human kind of traffic, just in general, outside of hunting. The days you were in there, let me ask it this way. The days you weren't in there, what was the weather like?
The same as, which is weird. Yeah, like very similar. It's like,
because I was like, maybe it was that there was like rain those days, which kept like the hikers, bikers, bird watchers like out of there. And so they kind of had free reign. And the days you were in there were like nice.
But the one was like the cold front. I'm like, this is the day. I didn't see nothing today. The next day it warmed up like 75 and deer were fucking everywhere. And I'm like, what?
So that brings up another interesting question, right? So like you like cold fronts, right?
Everybody does.
Yes. I'm starting to change my mind a little bit on it.
Yeah,
like,
a lot of human pressure with cold fronts.
So, yes. So there's a couple. It's weird because, and I talked about this with Jake again. And the last time I had Jared Scheffler on, we didn't talk about it when he was on the podcast, but we talked about it after we kind of wrapped up the show. He was asking me about, I was getting ready to head out on my trip when he and I were recording. So he was asking me about like, hey, what's your plans? You know, just chopping it up. And we talked a little bit about cold front, warm front, stuff like that. And what I had said to him was, I'm starting to become a believer not a disbeliever, but I think this is the way I said it to Jake. I'm not as in love with a cold front as I used to be. And what I said was plus or minus the seasonal average on either side, like a few degrees I like. I was like, but I don't like a big swing in either direction. And most people do. They want that like, oh man, I got a 20-degree temp drop. Because it's just what you said. It's like that 20-degree temp drop, everyone's watching that. And that's a real easy day to see, boom, that's a great hunting day, right? But that like 5-degree change in weather, like I prefer that. Why? Because I don't know that the deer are going to move any less necessarily, but I can almost guarantee there's not going to be nearly as many people that I'm going to have to fight with.
And
so they'll move more naturally. So you might actually see better movement those days than you would on like a cold front, a true cold front.
And that, like I said, that big six, I just don't know, you know, what his deal is.
It's still haunting you.
Yeah, it's like, you know,
if people could see Greg's face right now, if we did video podcasts for this,
I've been pretty much hunting where he's at. There's actually 2 mega sixes out there. Like they're both just different antlers, just hammer sixes. Big heavy base, like everything, like just freaky deers, like big bodies, like they're just mature deer.
Right.
And I've been at that place, and it's like we are literally in the same woodlot, the same 100-acre piece, like, down to a 100-acre piece. When I'm in there, he's in there, and it's like just we don't cross paths, and it's like, and he daylighted a lot, like, and now gun season's starting up. He's probably going to get killed.
Right. Yeah, especially if he's daylighting a lot.
Yeah, like daylighting a lot, like way way too much. It's like, and all over the place too. Like I got a bunch of cameras over there. Like he's all over the place. It's like, and it's like this strip that he runs, and it's like it's just a weird like travel pattern. Like I don't get why
you're probably like 40 yards off, or you know what I mean. It's one of those things where, especially if it's in 100 acres, it's hard to be that far off.
Yeah, and that one day where I hunted, I didn't see nothing. The next day, he came by my one camera. You know, it was 8 times.
Jeez. From
like 7 a.m. to like 4 p.m. Like. And the one camera is literally, it's like, it's out in the open, like it's just an oak flat. You can catch a lot. Like he's just like no security cover, no nothing. You're like, dude, like, where did you come from? Because in New Jersey, you don't do that. Like deer that size.
How's he gotten that old? You know what I mean?
Either he's super old and he's like going senile, like,
and he's like
a year and a half or 2, just phenomenal. He's just a freak of a deer, you know?
Right. Yeah. He's old. He's like, somebody kill me. I'm over it.
and the other place I hunt, I pulled all the cameras in at night in that fog storm, and there was 3 instances where a buck was like just standard cameras, you know, not cells. And I pulled all the cars. I get home checking them. I'm like, so 12 o'clock, there goes this big 9. And this is the big 9, like going into this laurel patch where doe's bed and buck's bed. And here I am at 12:30 going in the edge of the swamp to laurel.
Right.
Never seen a fucking deer. Here's me leaving. Here's this big 9, like half hour after me, and I'm like 3 times, and I'm like, dude, like I just can't catch a break, and I'm like, they're running in there like, it's like we're hunting literally the same piece, like the same thing where the big 6s are, is like this big 9. It's like do
you think that in that instance, did you bump him maybe?
No, he's going in like an hour before I get there.
Oh, okay.
He's just walking by like 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I'm like. And you see me, and you see me like I'm an hour behind, and like where that camera is, it's the cart road. You know, it's an old abandoned cart road. You know, it's not even really a cart road anymore, but it's a pretty open spot. It just gets a lot of intel. You know, where the camera sits. I got it low, and you can see everything.
Right.
You know, you see him coming and going, and it's like, man, I just can't seem to. I'm always just on the wrong side of the tree, so to speak, and it's like. Right. I've had so many good encounters, and like seeing that, like that camera intel like that, it's like, dude, I'm there. Like what I'm doing is working. I am on big deer on 3 different pieces, like a lot, which is crazy for me.
I was just going to ask.
And it's like, all right, the plus side of that is like, I'm not a big rut hunter, so to speak. I'm not very good at it, you know. And I'm like, I'm really made some progress last 2 years.
Right. So I was going to ask you, you know, because. One of the things that you and I would talk about the past couple seasons when I was on deer, around them, just couldn't get them killed type of thing, where, you know, you would just kind of tell me like, dude, you're having a killer season. Like, you may not have stuck anything, you know, yet, but just look how many encounters you're having and how many quality encounters you're having. You may not get an arrow off, but it's not because you weren't in bow range. You know, you would just tell me it's because the deer just did deer things and kept you from releasing an arrow. And so you're kind of having the same thing, man, where it's, when I think back, you know, to all, like the whole time that you and I have been friends, right, which is, I don't even know how many years now, like going on 7 years or something like that now. Like this might be the best year you've ever had. Mm-hmm. Like, would you agree with that? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As far as.
Just encounters and seeing deer and being on good deer.
And like I said, I look back now, it's like, have I always been on deer like this? Because very rarely would I ever like put cameras in somebody's spots, like going in, like, and this year kind of changed up. The last 2 years, like my camera strategy, it's like I do walk by some of my cameras, and I never check them because I don't leave the scent, because the does are just, you know, they pick right up on that stuff, and it's like, and it just feels good. And I'm like, man, I know he's going to be in that northeast wind. They're going into that bed, you know, and it's weird, like a lot of those counters are like midday, it's like that wind shift. You know, I'm like, I know the wind's going to shift, you know, and I kind of go around. So it's like, maybe I need to find an entrance before that wind shifts, because they're going in on these wind shift days. I'm not seeing them, but they're going in there with a stiff northeast wind. These bucks are going into this laurel patch.
Right.
All right, now I need to find a way to hunt that, you know, because they're literally straight northeast. They're coming right into that bedding area. So it's like, all right, now I need to go back behind at 11 o'clock, see where they're coming from.
Right.
You know, so a lot of stuff to take away from that. It's a lot to unpack this off season. But I'll be at work I'm looking at the map.
Yeah, I know.
Like, what are you doing? It's like,
I feel you.
I'm practicing killing. No,
right. How many years or how long have you kind of monitored these 3 spots?
I've always hunted them, and last 2 years I got season. This would be the 3rd year.
All right,
third season.
We've always said the 3rd year is always kind of like
it's like it's
the year where it starts to come together, and whenever there's something that you're doing new, and you might have some familiarity with these pieces, but like you've changed your trail camera strategy up to where your intel now is way better than it was probably before.
And the one piece, super excessive amount of pressure. So it's like what I'm doing is working because there's a lot of pressure this year, and these bucks, I always knew they're coming through. They're not going to. They're still their place loaded with does. They're coming in there, so it's like there's always trucks at the parking lot, and it's like it didn't really deter me because I know what's in there, and like so that's forward progress for me. Like I'm happy with that. Like last year, being at full draw 4 times, no shots going off, but I'm in it, you know. And like this year, all the stuff I'm having, and you know, and with the trail cameras and like stuff I've been like logging and taking notes. It's like, man, it's slowly coming together.
Yeah.
And it's had some few cameras stolen this year, you know,
always,
which I had one, you know, up high with a lock. It just, somebody came out there with an angle grinder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You can see the marks in the tree. So they had climbing stick and went up. So I'm like, and that's the spot where the big 9 and stuff was. So I'm like, all right. You know, and it's like, it's thick stuff. So I'm like, and my cameras are pretty well hidden for the most part, you know? So I'm like, all right, so somebody's thinking like me, stealing my shit. So it's like,
right, not thinking like you, but not like you. Yeah. Like they're stealing your stuff.
But it's like,
or they brought a grinder into the woods. Like,
so they found they had to come back with it, you know?
Either that, or they're scouting with a grinder, which even is like, I'm like,
it's New Jersey, so it's normal. It's like, oh wait, here.
I brought my my metal torch with me. You know what I mean? Like,
but I'm not even deterred. Like right now, like now gun season's coming up. You know, like
yeah. So what's your plan for that? Like how are you gonna, you know, you're not done. You got more season left to go. But
I got till the 31st of January.
Yeah. So how are you gonna manage? You know.
I pulled a bunch of cameras because I know I lose some during gun season. I got the ones that are locked up, so hopefully they don't get shot. But Sunday, I'll probably be out. I'm not going to work this Sunday. I'm going to go out and just reapply cameras and thick, nasty shit. You know, and like I've already deployed cell cameras in the wintertime like last year was the first time, I think. Like 1 or 2. Like I got 5. And I usually keep them for like people. I'm actually going to go down where I've had some buck sign that I found like after like right around like Christmas time,
right?
Years like historical type buck sign. I'm gonna go put them in those spots because baiting gets super heavy now because we got a lot. December's a lot of doe days, muzzler days. Same with January, so a lot of people are baiting.
Gotcha.
But some of these bucks they're not bedding close to the bait pile like the does. Like they're still off. Right. There's swamp, there's browse, there's thermal cover. So I'm kind of focusing my efforts
on those,
on heavy, high stem count swamps.
Right. What do you think? How are you feeling about heading into like the quote unquote late season? Like I feel like you're going to kill a deer before the end of the year.
I've never killed a buck in January.
I feel like you're going to kill one in January this year. It's got to feel like, cause you're on too many good deer. You're on too many deer
on 3 different pieces, which they said is, I'm not a big deer kind of guy, you know, like I don't see a lot of big deer every year, like 1 or 2, and I usually kill them, you know, and it's kind of like, I've always been good at that.
Right.
But this last 2 years, it's like, man, I've been just chipping away at it. And it's like sooner or later, like something's going to have to fall my way, literally like fall my way because you can't just keep going there and being so close and not have another opportunity.
Yeah.
And my shooting's been good. You know?
I was going to ask you like how.
And I changed like I went to the Rebel platform, the Latitude Rebel platform. It's a little bit bigger with my 2 ring of steps, you know, and I've been practicing out of that on bigger trees because I think I'm going to go hunt little trees with a little bit more. There's not a lot of cover come January, so I'm going to try to go to a wider tree to help break up my outline because I get busted by does a lot in January. It's just like,
tell me about it.
They're all over the place. It's like because you're hunting the swamp, so it's like ants. They're coming out. And it's like you're in this little 6-inch tree. You're like, well, this isn't going to end well.
Like I might as well not even came out.
Yeah.
You know
So it's like there's like no cover whatsoever. You know, in the swamp, like it's barren, so you have to get 15 feet up, you know, and find a tree with a big enough, you know, trunk, I guess, to give me some cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, we were talking about the boots before we started podcasting.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I got my feet, I got the boot game kind of figured out. And some of the Osio late season stuff, you're sweating that stuff, dude.
Yeah.
It's like, hopefully the year comes because I'm sweating. So it's like being able to sit still in the cold is definitely, like last year I noticed that having good gear, I can sit motionless, which, you know, late season, you just move your hand that much, it's over.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as you said, you know, being in a 6-inch tree, and they're coming out, you know, like ants, and you're just like, oh my God, you know, you're
afraid to breathe, and it's like, there's just blow and get it over with, you know, like, let's
because I mean, there's really only one area that you can kind of set up for it. That you set up with whatever the area is that you think they're going to come from to be kind of hidden from that, right? But basically, that time of year, everywhere else for the most part, because I mean, all the leaf covers off and stuff like that, especially when you're hunting like some swampy areas and stuff like that, where it doesn't have a lot of mature trees. You know, I won't say mature trees, but just, I guess, like tall vegetation, if you will, right? All the cover it's a deer's world. All the cover is like 6 foot and lower, essentially, right?
And it's one thing, like the good part is like the Laurel. Like I can only get like 10 foot, but there's some trees like I pay attention to now. I'm like, all right, I can get up in there. Because a lot of times it's like you're scouting, you're going through, I'm like, man, that'd be a great tree. But you don't ever mark or whatever. It's like, it's just hit a random mark. But it's like, all right, now it's like, I get about 10 foot in that. And it's like, I'm 20 feet out into like a open swamp. Like, man, I can get about 12 feet. And like, I'm not skyline. I'm like, okay, well, those little couple trees, the Laurel's pretty good on there. So I try to pay attention to that stuff. You know, in January, February, when I'm walking through, I'm like, okay, I can get about here, you know, because a lot of times you're going in January, like I'm kind of, you know, scouting the sign, you know, swamp's frozen over a little bit, like, all right, they're coming through here. Well, I don't have a tree necessarily picked out, but it's like, I know the area. I'm like, okay, there's some Laurels over here. Like I can get up. I have some protection over here.
Isn't it funny, man, like how the different time of the year, right? Like the time you're talking about there specifically, that time of the year gives you certain things that you don't get in other times of the year, right? So things like if you have snow, right, or ice that's built up along the swamp, you can kind of see where they're walking clearly, like where they're moving, right? But the thing that you get taken away from you is earlier in the year, that place is just like a quagmire of cover, right? And so you can almost sit up anywhere, and you're going to have breakup, or you're going to be hidden, or whatever the case is. That's how I ended up killing that buck in PA this year. He came out. Actually, did almost the same thing the doe did the previous year, where I killed him. So it's almost like I got a dry run the year before that doe, because I shot him almost in the exact same spot. But where he came out from, I've been beaten by 2 different deer coming out from that same exact spot. And it's because those deer came out later in the year, or it was a hunt later in the year, and they slipped out there and I got nothing. Right. And so this time of year, you know, mid-October, I had plenty of cover. I was still kind of naked there, but I was still able to get away with, you know, I was able to get away with it, you know. And
their pressure, I know, like anybody that hunts high pressure states, especially like states that bait, dude, January, these does are literally, they just look up. Their dangers literally. So I find myself sometimes just hunting from the ground, or like 3 foot off the ground, you know, just enough to, you know, get me up off the line of sight, so to speak. You know, I'm in a pine tree or something, just in a blowdown. I'll just get right up top of the blowdown, just so I can just see a little over the blowdown and kind of still see. I'm still like sitting on the ground, but not, you know.
Right. Yeah. Man, I hope you knock down a big one this year, dude, in the late season.
Yeah, it's I feel good about it. It's the last couple seasons I've get kind of worn down. Like I'm fortunate enough I get a lot of time off from work. You know,
Right.
I get 5 weeks off, so it's like I hunt hard, and then it's like December's my busy season at work. So then by January I'm like, man, I'm kind of pooped out. You know, between hunting and working, and it's like now I'm like, I want to kill a late season buck.
Right.
Like I've missed the November magic, but late season they're very predictable. Like, so if you can find them in late season, they're going to stay in that pattern until that food source dries up. Yep. So it's like, all right, so I know where some guys are baiting, they're habitual baiters, you know, and I'm not necessarily going to cut them off, but I know a buck's not going to be bedding within 100 yards of a bait pile. So it's like, well, all right, you're baiting, I'll come back 125 yards, 130 yards, you know, and
right.
Sorry, buddy. Sorry about your luck.
Right.
But it's like I was out the other night pulling cameras there in that fog storm, and across this creek, I'm standing there. I'm like, oh, yellow gold. Looking all around, it's like, look up. It's just a giant corn pile that was just put out there that day. So figure Friday night or whatever, Saturday night, and I'm like, oh. I look over. There's a cell. I was like, I'm standing there looking at it, looking all around. I'm like, there's a cell camera right there. It's just like, looking down there. I'm like picking it up. I'm like, you're
like tasting it. It's like, oh, dinner, you know.
But it's like that is what I got to deal with like right now is the switching of the bait piles. So it's like it's very like I'm on them, and then I need to.
Well, it's just like an extra set of pressure. It's like you know the people are going to be there, so you use their pressure to your advantage to push the deer into specific areas.
So I think in January I'm gonna tell my work I need to leave at 1:30 2 days a week. Come in 5, leave 1:30 so I can hunt midweek, like a Tuesday, Thursday, because most people aren't. It gets dark super early now, so I'm like, all right, well, I can get in there for the last 2 hours, you know. And I might do a couple presets. I got a bunch of hang-ons and stuff like that, and ring of steps. I might throw some of them out just so I can hurry up and scurry up a tree. You know, I don't need to set anything.
Especially if you have spots you know you want to get to.
Yeah.
You know, because to your point, if you do your intel or your homework, you'll know where deer want to be, because otherwise in the late season, if you're just setting up to set up, you know, it's not like late October or early November where you got deer that are going to be moving to check scrapes, and so you just might catch one cruising around somewhere. You know, that's not going to happen this time of year. It's like hunting earlier mid-October, right, where it's like you got to be where the deer are at, not where they might happen to mosey through. So if you have that kind of pointed, why not hang, you know, something that's semi-permanent or not permanent, but just a place where you can just zip in and zip out, because you know that's where you're going. The deer are in this area. You know,
I got 2 hang-ons out I put up this year for that. Already I'm kind of cleaning the one spot. You know, I put 2 hang-ons, you know, and they're only, you know, they're tucked in a holly tree, but you can kind of see them, you know, so it's like they're tucked in for deer movement wise, but it's like
visible enough for humans so they're like, oh, someone's hunting here.
Yeah, and it's like where they're set up, but it's like, you know, I'll still use the saddle, like the hybrid hunt, you know, still face the tree just because of the shooting. Yeah, but I'm like, that's pretty good. I can sneak in, you know, and give myself an opportunity. I think that screws a lot of people in late season, that getting out there and getting set up, because I've had, you know, running cameras now, those deer move. They have 3 o'clock sometimes they're moving. Yeah. You know, so it's like you need to be ready to go at 3. Yeah, a lot of times, 100%. Like I'm just kind of getting set up at 3. You know, there's a lot of movement and possible noise, so it's like I need to
ixnay on the old sound.
But even like I don't know if I told you about the hunt in October, the 23rd. October 23rd was a good one. I actually called out of work that day because everything was perfect. The 20th I found just a scrape line and rubs. And I'm like, man, this is the spot. And I was like, I got to hunt this now. Right. And it was like, the wind was crappy, you know, and I was like, and then it was like, had a little bit of cold. It dipped down like 10 degrees. And like the wind was good. I was like, I'm going to go in here. So I called out of work and slipped in there. And I was at full draw at a nice 8 at 18 yards. But how I came in, I must have, in the dark, like kind of crossed, because he was coming in and he just like stopped. It was him and another buck on the 23rd, you know, big one in the front, which is weird, you know, and a little one in the back. But I see him coming, I full draw, and I'm, like I said, I was 3 feet off the ground. And like he just needed to come out of this pine, like this big old pine. I seen his nose, his neck, and his ass. As I'm a full draw, and I was like, dude, and I'm like trying to lean out, like the test's gonna give me any more, like scream me a little bit more. But I'm like, nope. And he was like, and like, I just think I got lost in the swamp coming in because I thought I was gonna come in from this way, and like he got super spooky. So I think I might have dipped down and kind of came back up in the dark, because I never been in there in the dark. It was like I seen it, and I was like, I got to come back here. I was like, well, yeah, I'll just come this way, and it's like
it's never what you think it's going to be.
And it's like, but that was pretty cool. Like I thought I was going to kill that deer because he came in and was like, everything you want, dude. 17 yards broadside, and I'm like, just give me like one more step, dude, because my arrow is heavy enough, like I'll break that shoulder. Like I got no problem like tucking it in there, and I'm like, I'll go right against that pine tree. I'm either going to kill that deer or hit that pine tree. I love those odds, It's like I'm either going to kill him or I'm going to hit that tree,
or nothing.
Yeah. So it's like I got no problem taking that shot, and it was like he literally just that freeze, and you're like, and I'm like, oh, he got me. Something happened. He either caught my scent or ground scent or whatever, but he was like nose up, down the ground, like nose up. I'm like, come on, man.
You've had more deer encounters and more deer drawing this year than anybody I can think of.
That's what the David from the Whitetail Experience, he's like, there's not too many people I know that can shoot 3 bucks in a 24-hour span in 2 states.
In 2 states, right? And then be at full draw on like a couple others,
But if it's like the mountain, like anybody hunt the mountain laurel, like where I am, there's a lot of laurel. It's like it's so thick. You don't. There's no dedicated lanes. It's like you're like little pockets, and it's like it's probably the most challenging place. Like I would rather hunt the salt marsh cattails. Yeah. Because it's a lot easier actually than where I'm hunting. It's flat, monotonous, not a lot of terrain features. Like it is a very mentally taxing place. To hunt.
Yeah. 100%.
And to hunt without the use of bait and and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, man, I think you're going to kill one here in January. I'm looking forward to like a good text from you here this hunting season yet.
Maybe Saturday.
I'm going to call a shot. Saturday, it's going down.
I'm going to Delaware Saturday.
I don't even know what the date is on Saturday. We're going to mark this down here real quick. What is? Let me find the date real quick for Saturday. We're going to Saturday the 9th of December. Greg Litzinger. I will receive one text message from Greg Litzinger that includes antlers. Well, brother, before I let you get out of here, man, I always love talking to you. You're one of my best friends. You were actually, I think you were the first person I called whenever I was in Kansas. I think you got the first phone call.
You were like, I think you sent me a picture.
I did, yeah. I sent you a picture, and you were legit the first person I called. Like
I was sitting on the couch, and Mom was like, "Who's calling you?" I was like, "Cliff." I was like, "Somebody calls you at 9:00 at night during hunting season deer." I was like, "They killed a deer." I was like, "That's just nobody's calling me like, hey, what's up?" I was like, "We're not 20 anymore." I was like,
I'm in bed usually. You know what I mean? It's like I'm on the couch, passed out at that point. Yeah. But no, man, it's like you're one of my best friends, dude. You were legitimately. I called you before I called my dad.
Nice.
Which is funny. You were the first call and one of the first text messages, and so I'm hoping that you're able to fill your tag this year because a lot of the stuff that I've been able to do, it's like I wouldn't have been able to do that stuff if it weren't for you. Helping me rebuild my shot and to make the shot that I had to make out there.
If I can't get any good bucks, I'm literally just going to just massacre does.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's it. It's like death is coming.
Death is coming for someone. But before you get out of here, dude, let people know where they can follow you on Insta and anything that you got going on that you want to make people aware of.
So Instagram, YouTube, there's a few. Anybody that does Ring of Steps and platforms, I just put a new video up there on YouTube. That simplicity of it.
Yeah, awesome, man. But after you kill on the 9th, you'll be back on and we'll talk about your kill. That's what we're going to do. But
mark it.
I'm
calling it.
We're out.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.